So we'll call the meeting to order. We'll do a roll call first.
Doug Mallory. Here. Richard Shell.
Here.
Wayne Feldmeyer.
Here.
Ed Hamel.
Here.
Jim Weezer.
Here.
Larry Hatner.
Here.
Josh Grant.
Here.
And before we get started, I just thought I'd kind of explain how this process works here with the which is fine, but we can't discuss anything at all among ourselves until we come to the meeting. So a lot of times we have discussions about things and it's not thought out thoughts or anything. So some of that gets put out there and it's open for public comment. You can do something in the public. So that's some of that. We get these packets like a week ahead of time, all of us board members, so we have time to look at them. You know, so that's how this works. Then we come here and we're all just starting the same as you are. So I just wanted to get that out there. And then do we need to read the public hearing again? Or do that again? We might as well, I suppose.
Notice of continuation for a public hearing. Please take notice that an application has been made by Joseph Reed and Craig Helpy, 523 Enterprise Drive, Caledonia, Minnesota, 55921 for a conditional use permit to operate an agriculture-oriented business in an agricultural district. Section 14-43, conditional use of subdivision 1, subsection 1 in Caledonia Township on the following premises to wit: northeast quarter to northeast quarter, section 12, township 102, range 6, Houston County, Minnesota. Parcel 30128,000 and 30128,002. Said applicant standing making application is as the owner of said estate. The hearing on this application will be held at the Houston County Commissioners Room, City of Caledonia, Minnesota, at 5 p.m. on Thursday, March 24th, 2022. All persons having an interest in the matter will be given the opportunity to submit comments relative to the granting or denying of said application. Comments should be mailed to the Environmental Services Department, 304 South Marshall Street, Caledonia, Minnesota, or emailed to Martin Herrick at co.houston.mn.us. Must be received by Tuesday, March 15th, 2022. Comments in regard to the petition received by this date will be part of the public record and will be made available for review by the Planning Commission prior to the meeting. Houston Planning Commission,
Maybe at this time we just ask the applicant to come forward for a brief kind of a summary. Again, we know most of it, but just start, and then we'll probably ask Mr. Flaherty if he wants to speak on the other side.
We're gonna have Justin Meyer do the speaking. Thank you.
All right. 30 days ago, we were told to get something worked out with those opposed regarding our application to Houston County Planning Commission for a conditional use permit. Our attorney tried to get a hold of those opposed to our application for said permit, and we did not get a response. After the last meeting, we went over concerns that were raised, and what stood out to us was that the people just did not want the building out there. Another concern seemed to be the size of the building, which we want to thank Bob Burns for taking his time and discussing the size of the building with us later in the week. Bob asked if there was any way we could downsize the building so we could satisfy those that were opposed. We went back and re-examined the use that we do and the layout of the building and came up with something that would work for us and hopefully those opposed. We decided we could downsize the building to 125 by 225, which would lower the roof height 3 foot compared to the previous, and still be able to not outgrow the facility and still serve our customers. We want to work with those opposed and find common ground, so.
Trying to do, every avenue we can to make everybody happy here. So,
Yesterday, day prior to this meeting, we received a seven-page response from Mr. Welch's attorney. We've read the response several times, and what we take from it, what is agricultural orientated business?
that's what we're getting out of the 7-page response. It's just every time we read it, it kept coming up. What is the agriculture orientated business? What is it? What's Houston County's ordinance?
Page 1 of the letter, Houston County zoning ordinance. Agricultural oriented business, including but not limited to commercial storage or blending of liquid and dry fertilizers, grain and feed sales, general repair and installation services for agriculture equipment, custom meat processing, agricultural supplies and product sales or warehousing, livestock sales pavilion.
Etc. But the main thing we focused on when we read these 7 pages was including but not limited to. That's how I keep looking at it. So what is agriculture orientated?
What is agriculture oriented? Is it a 4-wheeler, a side-by-side? Is that considered ag equipment?
Every farmer has one of those on their place. You go look, check fences, you go check your crops, but also you may use it for recreational deer hunting. You may use it just to go drive around. So is that not recreational, or do you use it for recreational? Or
Is it
farm?
ag?
Is it ag? I consider it ag because I live on a farm. I understand. That's how I get around.
Gravity box. Well, that gravity box has now become a hopper bottom. Grain carts, it's unloading into a hopper bottom.
It's not a farm all age pulling a 100-bushel grain cart anymore. It's semis with grain carts. It's cattle pods. It's a cattle pod considering agriculture. Back in the day, they had a cattle trail that held 4 animals. One of the things I want, this was kind of my statement here, and it's kind of out of the box statement, but according to what I read, a pitchfork, that is now a skid steer. So is they not considering a skid steer part of ag? Because realistically, it has outgrown.
Right. We usually bring that stuff up is where we're going with it all is agriculture businesses are changing. It's changing, will continue to change, and it's going to change in the future. Our side of the ag is the transportation side. It's evolving more and more into that.
We disassemble the trucks to get the parts to repair equipment. I'm going to give you a few examples, just 2 quick. Cummins overhaul kit today is 365 days out to get an overhaul kit. You can't even get for a rod and main bearings. They don't have them. So our position here is we do buy trucks to dismantle. We know what we're looking for. Is it fair for a milk hauler, a grain, or a cattle hauler? You're gonna sit 365 days, or we have an engine that we sell to them. That's what we look at. Not everyone wants to buy new also. Not everyone can afford new. Like he farms, he understands it's hard. There's not a lot of money in it. They need to buy used. That's what we're looking at. So that's pretty much what we have. Questions?
Anybody have any questions right now, or should we can always have you come back.
That's fine.
But I think at this time, maybe we'd hear from the neighbors and their attorney could come forward and just kind of offer their thoughts.
Members of the commission, hearing me out today. I did prepare some remarks. Sorry, Michael Flaherty. I'm here on behalf of Joe Welch, who lives at 11807 Highway 44. I'm here today to speak on behalf of Mr. Welch and also the concerns of his neighbors and other members of the community. I did include an argument, written response, and I can, respond to a few of the things that were just said by the business owners applicants, but I do need to put certain things on the record just so that I can preserve my client's rights in terms of an appeal. So I did want to request that the commission and the county board and staff do the following. Analyze and determine whether the use of the property conforms with the zoning code related to the relevant conditional use. Specifically, my client's requesting that a use classification determination be made consistent in a manner that preserves my client's right to appeal that issue as provided for in relevant Minnesota appellate court decisions. Number two, we're asking the board to analyze and determine if any of the uses the applicant's property are considered accessory uses by the county. And if they are considered accessory uses, on what factual basis the board or the commission is making the determination to make that determination. Three, if the accessory uses are considered to exist on the property, I'm asking the planning commission and the county board to conduct further factual analysis to determine the extent of those uses related to the primary use. Fourth, we're asking the county to reference facts in the record, specifically the applicant's written and verbal statements when conducting any analysis. And five, we're also asking that the county review section 11.5 regarding the general criteria to grant conditional uses, which was not part of my letter. But I do think, my client and maybe the neighbors have made a written objection that was made part of the record previously, so I would ask you to consider that. And I will speak to one of those issues today a little bit. So here's the overall problem I have. We have with the business and the application before the board. There hasn't been enough analysis about who the customers are related to the dismantling of trucks and automobiles for parts. There was a statement at the last meeting, it's not included in the letter. I'm trusting that y'all read the letter, but the last 6 months, the applicant stated that the last 6 months of 2021, a statement about the customer base. It said just about all of the customers in that period of time were ag or farmers, I presume. And then about 20, which he said was about one per day. So I'm just asking, and this is an example, by way of example of the analysis I think the board should be doing. If there's one client or customer, agriculture customer coming into the shop every day, there is no need for a 43,000 square foot building. That is well beyond the scope of what the applicant's own statements are regarding what the business is. And so the only logical explanation for that is that the larger facility is used for the dismantling of the vehicles portion of the business. And then the question is whether that's incidental to the primary use, or what is the primary use. There's been no analysis of that by county staff and presumably by the commission. So if the primary use is in fact repairing vehicles, and the county in fact makes a determination that motor vehicles licensed to drive on public streets are agricultural equipment pursuant to the ordinance, then the question is, why are sales allowed and why is dismantling of trucks allowed? That there's no language in the code that would even remotely suggest that would be an appropriate use in an agricultural district where the property is located. So if that's being considered to be customarily incidental, in other words, an accessory use, which is a separate section of your code, is referenced in my letter, what makes it accessory and what makes it incidental? Incidental means incidental. It means less, much less than the primary use. And the way that all the statements were made at the February 24th meeting, the record is already exists at a point where it is clear that the primary use is the dismantling of trucks. I quoted and highlighted those statements, both written and verbal statements in the letter. And if that's the primary use, that is not fit within the listed conditional use. The including but not limited to language doesn't, in my view, doesn't even come into play, because so far, would you raise your hand? Oh, I'm sorry. So far afield from the other uses surrounding it in the code that it can't be said that an agricultural oriented business is to dismantle trucks. That's a parts business, not an agricultural business. And if that is the determination that the board makes, I would want my clients are requesting and preserving the right to appeal on the issue of what factual basis the board has to make that decision. And that hasn't been vetted out in the staff reports or at the board meeting on February 24th that I watched. Also, before I get to a few of the things that the applicants were talking about, I would also make the comment about the first criteria in section 11.05. This wasn't analyzed in my letter, but because I'm here, I'm going to make this comment. That portion of the staff report indicates that the conditions placed on the permit can be a mechanism to conform the use on the applicant's property to the county's land use plan. So essentially what the staff is saying is that we can put conditions on this permit to make it conform with the land use plan. And okay, so maybe that could be the case. That's bizarre to me, but maybe that could be the case. But if that is the case, then where are the conditions? What conditions? If we've already established, that's a tacit acknowledgement that it does not conform with the county land use plan. If you need to put conditions on to make the use conform with the county land use plan, that means without the conditions, it does not conform. And if that determination has been made, what are the conditions? The conditions listed are the permittee shall comply with all state, federal, and local laws and regulations. And 2, the county may enter onto the premises at reasonable times in a reasonable manner to ensure the permit holder is complying with the conditions and all that other applicable statutes, rules, and ordinances. There's no other conditions suggested to rectify that situation, to make this conform with the county land use plan. But there is an acknowledgement that conditions are needed or it doesn't comply with the plan. So when does my client get to see those? When are those going to be provided? When can we review those? And what are they? And if that's written in the staff report, we ought to know what the conditions are. And that brings me to the last point about this concept of a mediation. And this, that the property owners who are opposed to this need to mediate this with the applicant. And I think that is a fundamental misunderstanding of the process involved with quasi-judicial decisions. including conditional use permits. It's up to the county board to make the conditions and to determine what appropriate conditions are. I mean, certainly gaining input from the neighboring property owners if proposed conditions are reasonable is probably appropriate, but you know, my clients aren't zoning professionals. They're not land use professionals. They expect, you know, service from the government, and this is a service that's directly in the authority and obligation of the government. And I think the suggestion that, and that goes for the applicants too, they're not experts in drafting conditions. I mean, they should participate in terms of what is reasonable and what's possible, but I don't think that it's my clients or his neighbor's obligation to do that. I also did speak with Mr. Murphy about this. And so we talked through it, and he had the suggestion of reaching out to the landowners. And I suggested that I needed a review. At the time we spoke, I hadn't reviewed anything. Mr. Herrick had sent me the documents, but I had just taken the case and I hadn't reviewed, you know, watched the 2-hour video of the meeting last meeting and reviewed anything. So I called him back, and his paralegal said he was out of town for 2 weeks. So we haven't had a chance to meet. I was going to speak with him about it to see if we could talk through it. But he's gone for 2 weeks, so I don't have that opportunity. Other issues that I see with this are how sales come into play here. Why, what the level of sales are. You know, for example, the statement, just taking the statements that there's 21 customers, one a day. Are we including in those customers people who sell trucks to the business to have them dismantled? Is that a customer, or is a customer somebody who has their agricultural equipment in quotes repaired? What does a customer mean? And this gets to the point of what is primary and what is accessory. Is the primary business repair, or is the primary business chopping up for parts? And there's nothing in the record to suggest the answer to that question, but that's kind of a fundamental question at the very base of this analysis. And if that isn't answered in the board's mind, I would, state that we contest that and that we want to preserve our rights on that issue. I think that's about it. I don't want to take too much of your time. I don't think anybody listens more than 10 minutes anyway. So if anybody has any questions, I can take those now.
Questions?
Well, I guess one thing, when a customer comes in, is the onus on these guys to determine whether it's ag related, or is it if the customer says, I want you to fix my pickup because I use this on my farm? If I were those guys, I would assume that it's ag related, ag related piece of material.
And as an attorney that practices a lot of zoning, I assume that's your responsibility to determine that and to put conditions on the permit that state what they can and can't do. I mean, it's not my client's job to tell you what the applicant is doing. We expect their investigation to be done and that there are determinations to be made about exactly that. If the board is going to make the determination that a pickup truck is an agricultural piece of equipment within the meaning of the ordinance, exactly how are you going to determine what is ag and what's not ag? We demand service. We expect that to be done by the county. And that's exactly right. Yeah.
That's like documentation on every piece of equipment that, should this permit be granted, do you expect documentation on every piece of equipment that would come there?
This isn't remotely within the meaning of that conditional use, and we expect it to be denied. But if it is granted, we expect that the county will craft conditions to prevent non-agricultural equipment from being. And I think it gets to another point. What is customarily incidental to agriculture, right? Because this is an agriculturally oriented business. So if it's an agriculturally oriented business and there's a pickup truck that presuming you make the determination that is allowable to be fixed in this shop. Okay, well, incidental to agriculture is not my pickup truck that I bring there to get fixed. Incidental to agriculture is something related to agriculture. So that clearly is not a accessory use. Anything not related to agriculture clearly is not accessory use. I would say chopping up trucks for parts is not anything to do with agriculture, either, but if the board does decide to go forward with that, we expect conditions to be granted and inspections to be done. That's a large facility, 43,000 square foot, a large facility to just be fixing one piece of agricultural equipment per day, to the point where it doesn't make any sense. So we just want to put the onus, and your question is a good question. It's not one that I can answer, but I wouldn't be granting the permit if it were me. So I don't know. I don't know what to tell you. But that's something we're going to consider. Yeah. Anybody else? I'll stick around.
If these people or these workers, if they could fix this stuff without having to, the only reason they're tearing these trucks down is they can't get parts, right?
I don't know. I don't think that's relevant at all in this analysis. You could have two. I mean, here's your job as a quasi-judicial decision maker. And just for your background, I do represent many local governments, including the city of Caledonia. Your job is to apply facts to law. It's not to ask questions about what is the business owner's other alternatives. Those are non-important economic factors that to an appellate court might indicate that not the right things were considered by the board when making the decision. I mean, the only thing that the board is supposed to be doing is saying, all right, this is what's in the application. And maybe the application's insufficient, but I didn't submit it. The applicant submitted it. They can submit whatever they want to submit or supplement the application, which is normal. But whatever they submit, you're to look at that application and say, okay, does it fit within this ordinance? Yes or no? And then if they're going to do something else, you have to say, is it an accessory use? Yes or no? And then you have to support those decisions with facts in the record of the proceedings. Courts have found the record of the proceedings to be anything submitted to the county in paper, any statements made, any objections made, any videos, basically anything that you have in your ability to consider. So we don't feel like it's an appropriate response to say, well, we can't answer these questions, therefore we're going to grant the permit. I mean, I think you got to ask yourself, okay, they can't get parts, so they have to dismantle trucks. What does that have to do with anything related to a conditional use permit application? Like literally, it has nothing, is not related. Those are not related. Yeah, people have business problems all the time. I mean, my family's in the restaurant business. My extended family, about 15 restaurants. Yeah, they had a problem with the pandemic when they got shut down. But that doesn't mean, local government came in and fixed things for them. That was just the reality of things. Okay, they had to deal with that, just like they have staffing problems now. We don't expect the city of Duluth, where their businesses are, to go in and bend the rules and fit a square peg into a round hole just so that they can get employees. We've never asked that. I mean, yeah, of course, there's business problems, but it also gets to the legislative authority. So in my memo or letter, I said, well, this is the quasi-judicial authority, right? And that is true. I mean, that's just well-settled case law that you're acting your quasi-judicial role as a judge. I'm not suggesting you shouldn't use your legislative role related to this business or other businesses. I'm just suggesting you shouldn't do it at this proceeding. There were statements made, quite a few legislative statements made during that first meeting that I watched about, what else can they do? The city of Caledonia isn't helping them out. They have to do this, where are they going to go? Those are questions for the applicant to answer, but I would also suggest that if those are legitimate concerns, which they may be, I'm not saying they're not, they're just not concerns related to this proceeding. That would be more along lines of a legislative choice to amend the comprehensive land use plan, which I would point out is almost 25 years old and maybe amended. And then also the ordinance, legislatively change the ordinance or rezone the property. I mean, that's what I tell my clients when they have something that doesn't fit. I say, well, you can rezone it. You can amend the code to add something to allow it if you want to do it. Yeah, I mean, those are the options. This seems to me clearly to be in this fit a square peg into a round hole just for this one particular business. It doesn't really fit in the ordinance. So, And my clients have a legitimate complaint here. We just want to make sure that we're heard on that and that we're, you know, our complaint is taken. Sorry, question. I'm sorry.
Yeah, excuse me. Yeah, if I understand what you're saying, the example of let's use a grain truck that you know is down, the engine is trashed, and they've got a choice. They can wait for a year for parts, or they can drag this truck in there and take the engine out and replace that. But that shouldn't be considered if they're, you know, you're saying that, yep, that's not legitimate. They can't bring that truck in, a used truck that was in an accident, who knows? And they got to tell them, no, sorry, guy, you got to wait for a year for parts because they won't allow us to bring this truck in and change the engine. Is that what you're saying?
That's a legitimate concern. It's just not a concern for a conditional use permit process. Conditional use permit, you're just acting as a judge to say this fits or doesn't fit within the ordinance.
We have to look at that and say, does that make sense? Is,
No.
you know,
No, you have to say, you have to
the
look at
common sense person would look at that and say, yes, that's the part of the decision process. And you're saying, no, that doesn't make any difference.
right. Yeah.
Well, that's your
Right.
That's your opinion.
And so, and that's why I'm pushing, you know, the first thing I listed 5 things I wanted the board to do. And if there are considerations like that are going to be taken into account when issuing or denying the permit, we would just ask that proper factual findings are made and justifications stated, so that we know what the justification is.
Well, and that's part of what the notes I've taken when these guys come back. I need to know if they're disassembling these trucks and you kind of threw in cars there too. They're just disassembling these trucks. Are they selling parts to other repair shops? That's important to our decision. Are they doing this for the benefit of these local farmers? Or are they doing it to sell the parts? I mean, you keep getting in there, we're breaking up trucks. They're buying parts, is my understanding. We need to verify that. If you say that's not relevant, that's your opinion and have your opinion. But I think it's relative to how they're dealing with this stuff. That's very different if Ed comes in and said, my truck just failed, and they say, well, we got a truck over here, we can take the engine out of it and repair yours, or you can wait for a year for parts. I think that's a good agricultural service.
So, yeah, what I would say to that is I would just read from what they said.
Yes, we have to verify that. I understand. And
Well, I think it's already verified. I mean, I think it's in the record. I think the record's pretty clear at this point. I mean, and
what, are they selling them? What does it say in there that they're selling the parts?
well, it says, they said in their application, we need a larger facility to service the demand for repair of farm-related equipment. The business would primarily be serving the local farming community, which to me doesn't fit this use. It's got to be entirely the agricultural community.
Okay, yeah.
And then sales are done primarily by internet. So I think what you might be getting very specific and saying it can be okay to sell a part by the internet as long as the part is sold to a farmer.
Yeah, but that's something we have to deal with.
Yeah, right. And it hasn't been dealt with. I mean, that's.
But your statement said anything they're bringing in is not acceptable.
Well, I think, just referencing. Just give me a moment. So this is what they said. and this is just a quoting from the last meeting, I'm just going off what they say. I mean, maybe like you're saying, there's more facts. You're right, there is more facts. I just have.
That's why we're here the second time.
Whatever they say, I'm taking it as true. I'll put it that way. So, what's going on is we outgrew our facility. It's 72 or 74 by 80. We started in 2016 with 1 employee. We started working, our customer base has grown. Our customer base has grown. Originally, we started working on vehicles, semis, on the Joe Root trucking side, and then it kind of evolved into working with local farmers. And then through the time, it was getting harder and harder to get parts. We started buying trucks to get parts to get the trucks going. So,
You don't think they should do that, huh?
well, I don't think it fits within that conditional use.
Okay.
How can you fix an agriculture truck if you don't have parts?
Okay, so, well, yeah, but the question isn't whether you have parts, question is how you got the parts. And a dismantling business that is a large facility to dismantle.
What's the difference if they buy the parts to a parts club where they take a truck apart and put it in there? What's the difference?
Well, because of the activity, because of the use. I mean, there's nothing in the code that says taking trucks apart. I mean,
If it's
if
for
you're,
agriculture, you're fixing an agriculture truck.
well, what you could just as easily say, are the trucks that they're dismantling agricultural trucks?
That might have been a grain cart. That might have been a farmer's truck that they're taking apart.
But doesn't the code require more than might have? I mean, doesn't it have to be that? I mean, isn't that what
Who's gonna
zoning is?
monitor it though? You got- Who's gonna run around and monitor all this?
Exactly. That's why I think you should deny the permit. Exactly.
Is there, if these guys dismantle a truck to get parts for an agricultural related piece of equipment, whatever it is, does it matter where the part came from? If it came from a commercial truck, that part goes into an agricultural truck, does that matter to you?
Well, I think if you go along the lines of argument of your 2 fellow board members, they're saying it does. They're saying as long as in some form or fashion, there's agriculture involved, that's bootstrapped into agriculture. And you could have a giant salvage yard chopping up in mass trucks, as long as all the parts that are taken are sold to farmers or used on farmers' equipment, that would be acceptable. And the way I look at it is, this is a conditional use. So what is the use? What are they doing? Are they repairing or are they dismantling? And so then it gets to, what's the level of, there is a lot of statements about, like, this is the percentage, 90, for example, in Mr. Murphy's letter, he said 90%, the sales consist 90% from equipment that has been repaired. But what that doesn't say is what percentage of the business is sales versus what percentage of the business is repair. Do you see the difference? I mean, I think that's important. If this is going to be, 90% breaking things down and selling them on the internet, but then repair a truck once a day, and that is a semi, but we'll call it agriculture. I mean, I think the record's pretty much built up that doesn't fit in that use. So I'm okay with that. If that's the determination. Again, I don't know what the determination will be, what the facts are going to be found. And I agree with the third gentleman from the left that there is a lack of facts in the record. I mean, we don't really know much of that. But that's, the record is what it is. And you have the right to force the applicant to provide more facts if you want to. We're not the government. We don't, that's not my job, my client's responsibility. It doesn't have to.
To verify your clients, would they expect the county to verify? Or would would a representative of your clients want to verify whether the parts are going?
If this conditional use permit were granted, it would be recorded by law. It has to be recorded at the county recorder's office against the parcel of land. It would then run with the land. So if they sell the business, this permit would last forever.
Right.
Okay. So if you're going to craft I think this is what you're saying. If you're going to craft a condition that says you're only allowed to take parts from an agricultural vehicle or put parts on an agricultural vehicle, and that was a condition, it is the county's job then to enforce that condition. So that's the difficulty here. And the words primarily appear, go look through my letter after the meeting today. The words primarily appear many times, primarily. Well, I mean, I presume the board, I mean, I'm gonna ask questions, you're supposed to ask me questions, but I presume the board wouldn't grant just an auto body repair shop, right? This was just my car, I have a Toyota Camry, I bring my car in there to get fixed, that's not okay, right? Otherwise, I really don't understand, I really don't understand what facts could be used to justify that kind of business. But yeah, I mean, we would expect the county to craft conditions that would prohibit any non-agriculture.
And then you would be happy with that,
Oh, no.
your clients would.
Oh, no, they won't be happy with it, but I mean, I'm just telling you, if you adopt this permit without any conditions, then how are you going to make, it says you may use the business for an agricultural, whatever you decide to write in there, how are you gonna, is there any way to reasonably enforce it? And of course, the fear here is if you go look, the photographs that were taken of the current facility in the city of Calhoun, there's a lot of trucks there. The fear here is that if you don't put conditions in, if you grant it at all, but if you grant it without adequate conditions to enforce the agricultural nature of it, it's going to last forever and there'll be an unfettered ability to do whatever. I mean, in this letter, think about his statements. The statements are the business has changed. But what if the business changes again? Like the restaurant business changed. My grandpa started his first Perkins 55 years ago. Business has changed, right? And you have to change with the time. So if you grant this permit, it's recorded against the property, it runs with the land, it lasts forever, and all of a sudden, things have changed again. And there'll be nothing, you'll be tied,
If one of the,
can do.
if one of the conditions is that this permit is granted as an ag-related business, then that could never change into a commercial business, because that would be one of the conditions.
Right, but your question was on enforcing it and how to draft a condition that could even be enforceable. Like, how are you going to figure that out? I mean, are you going to have, I'll just tell you, the county doesn't have, I know a lot of counties probably don't have enough staff to go in and do audits and do an police investigation to determine whether that Toyota Camry was owned by a farmer or not. It's not really possible. And that goes to why the permit should be denied. This just isn't, the comprehensive plan, I read it. It is an agricultural community. That is not an agricultural business. And it's fairly obvious that, trying to say that, well, look, yes, in any other circumstance, it's not agricultural, but as long as the client is related to agriculture, therefore it's agricultural, kind of flies in the face of basic zoning law that a use is the use of the property, not who the client is, but the use of the property. And I struggle with, finding any way to, when I talked to Tim Murphy, I just said, look, I'm going to look through the record and see if I think that they should grant this. I will work with you on conditions. I just don't see it. I don't see it in this case. I can't get there to do that.
Their problem isn't the fact that they want to tear trucks down. The problem is they can't get parts to fix it.
Right.
And that would be no different than if your Perkins company couldn't get food.
They can change the menu.
Yeah, you'd have to change the menu.
Which is their responsibility. Nobody's crying over my grandpa or my uncle's, plight here.
In this,
They just have to fix it. It's not. Yeah.
We gotta go with the times.
it seems like in this instance, changing the menu is not going to a parts store, but buying a wrecked vehicle to get their parts. That would be the menu change.
And I think but I still don't think it fits within the current listed conditional use. I reference this in my letter, but if you really want to allow this, there's a legal way to do it. There's multiple legal ways to do it. Just calling this a conditional use just isn't one of those ways. And, that comes with due process, changing the county plan, that there's public hearings that are afforded to all the residents of Houston County. There's, public hearings, there's ability to give public input and public comment period. It's all laid out in statute. And we don't want to waive that related to this business. My client wants his due process. He wants his ability to give input and make a statement. And to grant this in contravention of the zoning code now without doing that legislative work to actually look at the whole county and say, maybe you're right. Maybe things are changing so much that there needs to be changes to the future land use map and the comprehensive plan and then the ordinance. I told my client, they're never gonna like that, the neighbors, but I told Mr. Welch, if they do that, that's their job. There was a statement at the last meeting, one of you made I don't know who, but made a statement that this is our great. I think that's your job in a comprehensive plan analysis, in a zoning code analysis. You want to let this business out there, at least afford us the right to have it in the correct process and not, call something a conditional use that just isn't a conditional use. And that's, or rezoning, maybe and I'm not saying that you could legally rezone that property. You might be able to, you might not be able to, I don't know, but I haven't looked at it, so.
Well, the city of Caledonia had a lot of property here for a long time and they sold it. So they probably didn't plan on any business expanding in Caledonia. Is that right?
I have no clue. I don't think
See,
that's
these people come and tell us they've looked all over for land.
right. And so I would say to that is if you think that's relevant, that there's no land in the surrounding.
I would rather see it put right in the city, but you don't have any place the city doesn't want to work with anybody.
And I think
And that isn't their fault.
right, but whether whose fault it is not an issue to be addressed in a conditional use permit application. If that's the way things are going, there's not enough developable space in Caledonia or the other cities.
You guys are tying our hands because, I called the other morning and asked if I could go talk to a few people that own some of this land. And they said, no, we've got to make the decision on whatever comes before us here.
Exactly, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Whatever comes before you, that's your scope in this is very narrow. It's not to determine what the city's doing and what land is available and how to get auto parts and where auto parts come from. All of that is, your decision is, this is the application, that's the code.
But I've dealt with real life because I owned an Anderson wrapper. I had to go over and take my wrapper over to St. Joseph's and steal the parts off of brand new ones because Anderson would not be able to send me parts for weeks.
Right.
Well, I think that.
That tells you the whole story right there. If they could buy the parts and get the parts, they'd do it.
Right. Well,
And you're saying if that's their fault, if they can't do it, whose fault is it?
It's not a zoning code. The zoning analysis doesn't get into fault or whose fault it is. It's just a factual analysis about use. And, the questions that you're asking are going way beyond that scope, way beyond. And so that's what I would say to that. And I think, if the county wants to allow more of these types of uses out in rural areas, again, my client won't like that, probably object to it, but there's a legal way to do that. You are the legislators and the county board of the legislators. They get to make that, you get to run the county, just like in the city side. City council people run town, I don't run town, they run town.
Just one point here, though. I mean, I've read this thing pretty carefully, and this isn't that concise, what they permit or what they don't. They left some area for people like us to say, well, you think this would fit? And I think that's what this, but not limited to. That's a huge thing in there.
I disagree. I mean, I think
It's an interpretation.
Well, let them speak.
yeah, but including but not limited to, but then you have to say, what are the other things in that list? Is buying semi, not helping any farmers, but
It
buying
is helping farmers.
but buying a semi
Mhm.
from somebody out in Indiana or Iowa, bringing it into this factory, dismantling it, that activity is not related to agriculture.
Well, if they have to get the motor out of that one for this one here, they gotta get the part someplace, correct? If it's a semi
I
that
gotta move on.
Bill Joe had over here and he hauled corn with it for 10 years and it's sitting in the lot, they need power steering out of it. So they go over there and buy that, take it out of an ag truck, put it in another ag truck. Who's gonna run around and watch all that?
So, I mean, to ask a different question is basically what you're saying, there's no restaurants allowed in that district, conditionally or otherwise. If they open up a restaurant that says only farmers can eat here, by that same logic, that would be allowable. And that's what use analysis is. What is the use? Not what else can they do, or is it somehow tangentially or very loosely related to agriculture? Restaurants don't have anything to do with agriculture. You serve a farmer a plate of food for breakfast, that doesn't make it agriculture, that's a restaurant. Is it what?
I would agree with that.
Yeah, well, this is a dismantling a truck place. Doesn't matter the purpose of it, that's what they're doing. Use is what you're doing, not
And
who you're
use.
serving.
We're not, we might can move on, maybe.
Yeah, I guess we can always have you come back up
Yeah,
to
no,
address some things too.
I'm actually gonna probably head out soon, but I mean, I can stay around for a few
The
more
North
seconds.
has conditions that we have proposed. And we'll look at them.
If you want, I mean, if you want to go through the findings, I mean, I did prepare for the board.
Well, I'm not gonna, I mean, I'm not gonna.
You don't have time.
I'll take
I
it.
understood.
I'll take it, but I'm not gonna
One thing that, in your original statement, we don't put conditions on the bend things to make something work, the square peg in the round hole.
Well,
I
let me
mean,
read that.
conditions are to try to make, in this case, like the mediation, was to try to make people happy and work out problems that we might see down the road. The idea that we're just going to say, make things up just to kind of get our way, that's not actually what the conditions
I didn't
are.
imply that, I just implied, trying to see things in the most favorable light for the applicant beyond what the code really allows. And, it just, dismantling of trucks isn't really agriculture. I mean, that's core. It's not just because somebody buys something, forget about that. Just what are they doing? Taking a truck apart, buying a truck, not from a farmer, but just buying a truck from anybody, breaking it down, storing the parts, selling the parts online. All that doesn't have anything to do with agriculture. I mean, nothing. And then to say that you're gonna take, that truck might have 100 parts taken out of it, as long as you put one of them in a farm truck, that makes it agriculture, and you sell 99 of them online. I mean, that's like opening a restaurant, serving a farmer a plate of food. It's not making it agriculture. I would say though, that it is a problem. That comp plan is a problem. If you look at that comp plan, the conditions, the criteria or the factual finding was, we're gonna create conditions so that it doesn't violate the comp plan. And that's basically what your staff report says. So that's fine, but then what are the conditions? And I don't get that construct. I don't get how that's gonna be done or what they are, but I would wanna see those. Maybe they're in this document. Okay, well, is there any other questions? I'm happy to answer more questions. It's been interesting, so.
Okay, if Joe Welch had a few cars at his lot, would that be something that you'd be against? Because I've done business with Joe. He's a great man.
Yeah, Joe's nice.
Okay, and you know what? If I see a car at his place, I'm not gonna raise any hell with anybody or try to say that that's not part of his business.
It's a great example. So,
Yeah,
oh, you mean his business in town or?
yeah, his business in town.
Oh, okay. Well, that's not a great example, but I mean,
He should have the freedom to do whatever he wants.
well, I think zoning laws, the whole point of having zoning laws is to limit what people do in certain districts so that it doesn't offend the neighbors. That's the core of zoning. That's what we're here to do. I mean, by that logic, why have any? If it's, your house is your castle and you own your property, you can do what you want with it because you own it. Well, have zoning laws, just let people do whatever they want. And that would be disorganized. And I think, that's the point of the county getting involved, the government actually having to judge or analyze this kind of thing.
The thing I don't like is they tie our hands, so we can't even go out and talk to people. We have to make the decisions right here.
That's, well, you're supposed to. I mean, technically what I would say, and this, I'm not going to raise the issue out of this, but, there was a lot of discussion, public policy discussion here before the record was closed. And typically what I would say is you should hear all the evidence first before making a decision. And by continuing or tabling it for a future meeting, you're saying you're going to take more evidence, but there was quite a few statements that the decision had already been made. And a review in court might say, well, just like the judge, it'd be like the judge in a criminal trial saying, I find you guilty. Now we'll call the witnesses. So I would just caution against that a little bit. I think that, I'm not blaming anybody. I'm just saying, I just watched that video. Anybody who knows me around here knows I'm reasonable. If that was an allowable business, I would have argued against it on other terms. Not the fact that it just doesn't fit within it, but that's the most basic kind of analysis. And I think there was kind of an assumption that as long as there's farming somehow related to this, that's allowable. And if you just feel that it isn't, I feel that it isn't. So I appreciate the time anyway and the spirited questions. So
Well, I mean, we got an ordinance, so we gotta follow our ordinance, and we maybe need to change that ordinance in the land use.
Yeah, that's the
well,
thing.
you
We
gotta
can't
change.
do that right now, so
Yeah.
we gotta follow our ordinances the way they are as that.
And if I was being, exactly, that's all we're asking. Follow the ordinances as they are now. And if I was my clients, who I represent cities, they would say the same thing to me. They're like, why can't we just do this? I'm like, well, and I'm not telling you this, but I would come down on them and say, well, wait a minute, you haven't changed your comp plan in 24 years. How's that my fault? Every time they say, well, it's expensive. We don't have money in the budget to change the comp plan. It's a big process. You got to hire a planner and all this other stuff. And so it's a huge process, but that's the policy decision. If you choose not to do that for 24 years, you're choosing to have an ordinance way out of whack with what you might want. And, saving the taxpayer the dollar by not spending the money on that kind of stuff gives you the immediate gratification of low taxes, but it might, every time this comes up, there's problems like this. So anyway, I appreciate your time. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. Let's see. You guys want to come back just for a minute or kind of let's keep it organized here, I guess.
Yeah, a few things that just kind of bothered me. One of the last things he said was his feeling that about the ordinance, that agriculture orientated business, that anything ag, that his feeling that that's not the case right here, including but not limited to. That's what I see. That's first.
I just want to kind of clear something up about the one customer per day thing. I think the way he interpreted it was one customer comes in, he's there for 1 day and he leaves. That's not the case. If that was the case, you wouldn't need a building that size. But these two of these projects take from 1 day, it could take up to a year. Depending on the truck, completely redoing the frame on the truck, going through all the bushings, the bags, the engine mounts, the hoses. It's not only there for 1 day. That truck's gonna be there for 1 to how many days it takes. So it's not only one vehicle in there per day in the shop. What I want to clear up.
And another thing was, he related back to pictures of the equipment. Need a facility, so we don't have that. We keep telling people this over and over. I don't want it anymore than anyone else, but everyone keeps reverting back to this. It's not the case. We're not a junkyard. I'm confirming, we are not a junkyard. The other thing that really bothered me, I guess, over all this, he said it's a use of the property, not the customer. Well, I think my customers come first, so sorry, just.
We're here for the community,
And
help everyone to serve the community.
And it talks about, do we sell some stuff on the internet? Yes. I'll get you the record. You guys can even call them. We'll get it back to you. Sold a motor out of Nebraska just the other day. Guy was a grain farmer. His engine goes out. Can't get an overhaul kit. We have one online. He buys it. He comes with this farm plated truck. Take this engine back to Nebraska. He could have bought that engine anywhere. Why did he come to us? Reason why we're fair. We understand the prices. We're not gouging people. He could have went anywhere, but he came to us. He says, well, you took it out of a wrecked truck. That ain't agriculture. Yeah. Including but not limited to.
Seemed to be a question they had was primary use versus accessory use. Now, you're talking about selling parts. You have said that your primary use for the building is to repair farm equipment.
100%.
100%.
That's our primary use.
What-
Our service,
Accessory use, what percentage of your business is going to be accessory use as far as, dismantling trucks and selling parts?
what would you say? Less than. We haven't bought a truck in 6 months to tear apart. There's just rot room,
I'd like to make a.
very
you got-
small
Go ahead.
portion.
I'd like to make a comment that that example you just gave is what people are afraid of. I sold this here. We made some money on that. And if you're selling stuff to other repair shops on the internet, that's going to get you in trouble. That's, I think they talk about how many you can have. If you have that size of the building and we have a restriction on there, that's all you can have. That will limit to how many trucks you're having. And then we need to know what percentage of your resources, time, whatever, is in recycling these truck parts. How much of your business is taken to do that? I mean, that's the thing that we're hearing. They're afraid you're going to be a recycle shop.
No.
But how much of it is, what?
I'd say less than 10.
10%. So most of the stuff you repair, you buy new parts for. 90% you're saying we buy new parts for, that it has nothing to do with this recycling.
Correct.
When you have this building, what percentage of your building is going to be for recycling?
I would say roughly 10%.
Are you going to advertise? No, we have,
Really haven't.
here's our inventory. And you put that on the internet, people are gonna like that. Then you're promoting and increasing this part of your business that is the recycling. And that's what people want to avoid. It should be, we repair this, and I say, primary, we have to define that.
Right.
Is it ag if farmer's wife has got a car and she drives it to work, but something happens to it, so she takes it to your shop because they know you? If you do 20 of them a week, I think there'd be a problem.
Right.
If there's one or two along the way, that's why we have primary, I feel. And we put the restrictions on it so that you don't become a parts shop for other.
We're fine with that. We really want to work
And
with everyone.
everything is in the building. The rest of it is lawn and it's mowed and it's kept up.
That's one of the reasons I think that the building is so big, because when you take big equipment, so you have the like, let's just say the grade truck, right? You have the grade truck that's broken down, which has to be, according to section 2912, has to be inside. And then if you're going to have another grade truck to get parts off, that has to be inside. So now you've got two trucks inside to fix one, and it'd be kind of unrealistic to believe that you only ever have one piece of equipment. So I mean, if you could have 2 or 3 pieces of equipment just to fix the one. I think the size for these guys is convenience and kind of common sense. We have to keep everything inside. It's got to.
Typically, how long does one of these trucks you buy till you sell it? I assume at some point you try,
We, we have someone come in and take what's left
yeah,
away.
yeah,
Um,
recycle it.
Right.
Typically, how long is the truck there?
I would say 3 months generally.
Okay.
Speaking,
And then you take what you think is valuable
correct,
and you keep it.
correct. In a
Okay,
bigger
so there
facility.
again, now, you're gonna have a storage of this stuff. And if you become the go-to guy for somebody in La Crosse, that's not what this is for.
And
And I suppose, I mean, there's always instances, somebody that, maybe is based in Houston County, does, what do they call it? Rents out, doesn't rent it, he does custom work, but he's based in Houston County. That's kind of the gray line. But that's why, if you got, that's 10% of your business, I think that people are okay with that. But if it becomes 50 or 60, that's an issue.
our main thing though is the service side.
For the people, local
This
people,
area, correct.
do you sometimes find one for somebody? Or is it, well, I need this engine for this, whatever, something, and you look around and say, oh, here's one coming in.
Yeah.
We go buy that, and then he gets the engine, keeps it, what do you think is valuable, and then you trash it out.
Most definitely.
Any more? You want to address anything more, Mr. Flaherty?
No.
Okay. Any other members of the public want to speak on this one? Sure, come on up.
Last time. Very, very brief. Some of the people that I've spoken with also, it says, if you do this once, how does it look for the whole area? And if you multiply it by 10 times, and we do this 10 times down the same road, what are we doing to the same area? And how does that affect everybody? Not just the people that live here, but the people that travel through here, people, that enjoy. We have the most unique area of the whole world right here. Across the street. And it's anxious to hear that. And they try and keep businesses into the cities and not scattered out. If you're trying to put a building in a business that does possibly serve agriculture to a degree, doesn't fit there. That is why we're here. And I think that if we do this, and then the next city, everybody starts coming out. Instead of having businesses in the city where they belong, they start coming out in the county where they move that from Boca, Houston, and up and all the way through. I think at that point, we're gonna have a big mess. And that is a huge concern. Southeast and southwest Minnesota, but our whole little beautiful corner of our state here. That's why we follow this. I asked once if I could put my business when I first bought one of my houses out there, and I was told it does not fit there, it does not go there. And here I'm supposed to say, yeah, he's keeping me in the city. That's why my business is in the city, not out where I live. And I understand, but this us It just doesn't make sense.
Thank you. Um, hate to drag this out, but Mr. O'Flaherty? Okay, that's a different Irish clan, huh? Sorry. You said that you would take these people at their word, but you also said that we need some documentation. I'm just struggling with delaying this again, but also the need for some documentation. I mean, they said it was 10%. If I was in their shoes and I had 20%, I'd say, they're looking at it to their advantage and not. So I'm struggling with the rest of the members. Do we need some type of hard numbers, documentation? They said they sold an engine on the internet. Have they sold other stuff on the internet? I don't know that. And I don't know how we would find it out. But can we get some documentation on their use?
What is the ordinance say?
Their customer list for the last year.
But so we don't really have the power to dictate to them how to run their business.
You don't.
So.
Well, I'm not trying to, but
Well,
I'm trying to find out if we should, if this truly is a agricultural business. And I believe them. I'm not questioning it. But if this goes to court, we maybe need something that says we did our job and we documented how many people that were, and like Ed said, probably a lot of the stuff I bring up is for discussion. I'm not advocating it. I'm just saying that it would be better if we had some documentation that said, they're, I don't know, of the last 100 jobs they did, what percentage of them were agriculturally related. And yeah, you're right. I can't tell them how to write their business, but I can tell them that I need that to do that, to pass this. So I'm not trying to tell them how to run their business.
I don't know if that's really relevant. I mean, it seems to me that, we've got the proposal in front of us. We know what the facts are in the case. We know what the zoning ordinance says. What is our determination? Is it a ag business, ag-oriented business, or isn't it? Does it conform to the county use plan? Does it or does it not conform to the county use plan? And I don't know how much more information we can get that will actually clarify those facts. I mean, I guess it's basically up to us to make a determination. Do we think it's an ag business or don't we? Does it conform to the zoning ordinance or doesn't it?
Well, and I agree with you 100%, but I'm just saying that, if you have numbers and you can include that in the record, that is better. Is it worth coming back in another month? I don't know.
Are you
That's-
proposing that we make a condition that 90% of the business is ag oriented and 10% is sales? I mean, that's really hard to do.
It is, I agree. Yep.
That's really hard to
Yep,
do.
Yep, and then maybe we just take their word for it, like I said, and I trust them. I'm not saying they don't trust them, but it's, trust but verify.
Can our zoning go out there and do inspections once in a while, or we can put that condition in there too? can't we?
Yeah, we always have that condition in there, but I'm just saying that it would be, and what I'm hearing from the rest of the group here is that, no, we got enough information.
Well, I personally, I think that if somebody goes to those guys and says, I need a alternator for, right, it's a grain truck. Then, and they say, okay, we've got one that we took off of another one. Okay, we'll sell it to you. Well, they're just going by what the customer is selling them. They can't, how are they supposed to verify whether what somebody does uses it for commercial use or an agricultural use? It's impossible almost.
But I would say in that case, we're not a sales there, we're a repair. I will install that alternator for you, bring your grain truck in. I'm not a parts sales place. Sure.
Okay.
That's a good
All
point.
right.
Got a monitor.
State monitors that.
I guess I would kind of agree with what Jim was bringing up there. It's kind of up to us to determine if this is an ag business. And it is relevant to say that ag has changed. That's definitely relevant because ag is different than it was when my dad and I were farming together 40 years ago. And when I farmed, I mean, B. John Deere's and
Yeah.
everything's just different. I know people are buying drones now. That's going to be a new thing. Everything is different.
Yes.
And we've got some leeway here. I mean, it's in here. And it just depends if we think that this is ag related, it's kind of almost to that simple question in my mind.
Me too.
It just, and that's the bad part of being on these boards. People don't like what you do a lot of times, but that's not our job to be liked either. We've got, I mean, this ordinance is vague as heck is what it really is. And your point about redoing it is correct. But you go back to other uses here and it says other uses as determined by the Planning Commission and the Houston County Board of Commissioners that are similar to those uses listed above and are found to be compatible with other use already permitted in the district. And that's real objective. It's just whatever we think is useful at the time. You want to come forward again? I think
Yeah.
it is. Yeah, you know this stuff better than we do. I mean,
So if you're, I mean, I don't even think that that's a legal provision on its face. You have to get the state uses, but I have researched that. I didn't because I took the staff, I think everything is true. I just read the staff report. And, your zoning employee is telling me that it's this agricultural oriented business. If you're going to find that it's the 25, what I'll call the catch-all provision, two things. The Board of Adjustments or the Planning Commission is just an advisory commission in this regard. It's the board that makes the final decision, correct?
right, yeah.
And that's done differently different places, but that's how you do it. At least that's how I would vote. So you want to, I think it's not really advantageous for my client to tell you what to do. I guess. Okay. But I was not operating under the pretense that you would be using the catch-all for 1.5.
I'm just reading the ordinance. I mean, this is what we have. This is what we.
We're gonna work with that. I mean,
Yeah,
that's
so-
all right.
Yeah,
So then I'd also say if you do table it, make sure you don't violate the 60-day rule. You have 120 days to act on it. Without that, correct it. So I don't know where this is. I think it was February 2nd. You're well within that time period. Thanks.
suppose you guys would like to hear a delay because it's gonna make you wait longer and it's gonna be a problem. But
I think we, in good faith, interpret the ordinance that we have in front of us. And
That's what I agree. We've got to work with what the ordinance says, so we should use that and kind of change it in the land use plan. We all know that's got to be done, so. Right now, I think we're stuck with our ordinance and until it changes, what are we gonna do?
well, I guess and we can address a lot of the issues with the conditions also.
There you
And
go.
that's what a conditional use permit is useful for. Do we want to have a vote on if we want to table it or move forward, or we just move forward? What do we think?
table it for what reason?
Probably just to make sure we don't have a litigation problem. Would be the honest answer.
Is that something that the zoning administrator could, or how would we investigate that if we're gonna?
The attorney would look into it, wouldn't he?
You can table it again. I mean, is that what you're asking?
No, I'm
Well, I
asking
guess-
who we would have to, if we're gonna table it to get more information. How would we get that information? What resources do we have to get that? Yes,
I guess it's kind of subjective on what it is, but I mean, I certainly have some ideas. I mean, one of the things that's jumping out of me is, do you guys have machinery that's very specific to agricultural activity? In other words, boring machines and other kinds of equipment that wouldn't be, the size would not be for cars or other kinds of, granted, they still potentially be for trucks, but there's likely equipment that is very specific to ag-related activities. Not obviously not. And the sales tax, that's a,
yeah, do you deal with sale tax? I mean, exempt?
Yeah, so one question I would have on that is that the customer confidentiality thing, would we have to get permission from our customers to give that out? And the process for that. Some may or may not want their information, that they get their stuff worked on by us. I don't see why, but
Yeah, I think you could legally do it, but you don't want to have disgruntled customers either.
right, we'd have to get their permission first.
Well, you wouldn't have, you wouldn't have to give us the names. You could just give us the information, go through your for the last year. And, we did 30 sales, and I kind of think they misrepresented the term sales before. They said, I look at it as anything you bring money in as a sale, whether it's service or parts or whatever. For the last year, what percentage of them were tax-free, and I don't know, is that accurate? I guess most farmers have tax exempt, don't they?
Yeah, you fill out a form.
Yeah.
Yeah, even for fuel. So could you provide that, or you work with our zoning guy?
we'll take the information.
Yeah, we got tax exempt.
Well, then that takes another month then.
Probably does.
Is that worth doing?
I think we're getting into their business way too far for a zoning committee now. I mean, we can't dictate to them how, who and what and who they want to do business with.
We're not telling who they can do business with. We're just saying,
We're demanding if we want to know their business by their taxes, and I don't know if that's fair. I mean, do you want somebody coming into your business and investigating every client you did business with?
no, all we're gonna look at is, we did 40 sales this month and 35 of them were tax-free. That says it's a tax, it's a egg something. And that's, they've got their attorney here that indicates they may, and they're bringing up things that says, I got these. So if this does get appealed, it would be good to have that information.
Well, if we table this again and ask for more information, then I think it's on us to be really specific about what information.
I
we're
agree.
gonna ask
Yep,
them,
I agree.
And not come in and in another month, somebody say, well, wait a minute. Yeah, that's good to have, and thanks for bringing that, but now we need more. I mean, that.
That could be endless.
Yeah,
So where do you draw the line?
You got something to say, Justin?
Well, I was going to say that we do have a list here with us, but they do contain names on them of customers that were there for the past 6 months.
I just ran a quick report for 6 months.
and are the customers on the list all farmers? Percent,
What,
more than 90?
That was 90%.
I
It
think,
was 90% for what, last 6 months? Could you just make a copy of that without the names? Or we're just, I mean, we can trust you then to say, I will give you the last 6 months and the percentages, or the last year if you have it. And just make that a condition of the
Permit?
yeah. That makes sense?
so the condition would be that they verify that a certain, I'm stuck with primarily, right? If we say primarily, what does that mean?
I didn't say
90%,
primarily.
95,
I said we
85?
could verify that it's, I mean, that's a good measure if it's tax exempt.
It seems like we're getting into the weeds here. I mean, again, like I said before, I think it's up to us to determine whether this is a conditional use permit that we can accept or that we reject. And I guess I would make the motion that we go forward and read the conditions. If somebody wants to make a motion to table it, that's fine. But I'm saying that we should end discussion, and I'll make a motion to go ahead and
Call the question?
call the question.
All right.
So we usually do findings of fact in between, and we're gonna do that next, or do you wanna?
Well, that'll be the next step. I mean, I'd say we'll call the question. Are we gonna read the findings or not?
We used that from last month's.
Well, we have a motion, to do the findings.
And I'll second it.
So
I guess we better do a roll call on that one.
Okay,
Okay. Rick Myrie,
yes.
Wait a minute.
Who motioned there?
I made the motion.
I seconded.
It was a motion to go forward with the findings.
Right,
Yeah.
correct.
And we're using the findings from last month's meeting, right?
we didn't get to the findings last month.
Oh, okay. All right.
So we'll get them tonight.
Rick Myrie,
Yes.
Rich Schill,
yes,
Wayne Feldmeyer,
Yes.
Ed Hamel,
Yes.
Jim Weezer,
Yes,
Larry Hafner,
Yes.
Josh Grant.
Yes.
Now, this is gonna seem a little odd, but should we go through the conditions before we go through the findings of fact? Because it's really relevant to how we answer these questions. Does anybody else agree with that or not?
Yeah.
What's everything?
Sure.
Because the conditions are probably the most important part of this whole thing.
Yeah.
maybe you should read through the proposed conditions that you had just
I
given
can't,
us.
I think I gave out all my copies.
Here you go.
Okay, well, I gave the board suggested conditions for the route notification. First one, the committee shall comply with all federal, state, and local laws and regulations, including the following Houston County zoning ordinances. First one is section 2912 subdivision 6.1. No person may store or keep any vehicle of a type requiring a license to operate on the public highway but without a current license attached here to whether the vehicle be dismantled or not outside of an enclosed building in the residential or agricultural district. Second one is section 2913, subdivision 1, where any business or industrial use, structure, parking, or storage is adjacent to property zoned for residential use. That business or industry shall provide screening along the boundary of the residential property. Screening shall also be provided where a business, parking lot, or industry is across the street from a residential zone, but not on the side of a business or industry considered to be the front. Third one is section 30.4, subdivision set 7. In general business and highway business districts and in limited and general business districts, parking areas and access drives shall be covered with a dust-free all-weather surface with proper surface drainage as required by the county engineer. The operator of the principal building or use shall maintain parking and loading areas, access drives, and yard areas well kept. Next one is the section 30.4, subdivision 8, lighting shall be reflected away from the public right-of-way and nearby or adjacent resident districts. Note, I'm repeating these for emphasis because these would go in there. The number 2 condition is the county may enter onto the premises at reasonable times and in a reasonable manner to ensure the permit holder is complying with the conditions and all other applicable statutes, rules, and ordinances. Number 3, an operations plan shall be submitted to the Houston County Environmental Services Office for approval prior to or in concert with the building permit application. The plan shall address the following items: demolition and raising of existing building, including any MPCA requirements and disposal at the La Crosse County landfill. The building elevations, including the maximum elevation with side elevations and exterior signage and lighting. Next one is any associated new exterior structures either attached to the building or on the premises, such as makeup air units, dust collectors, fuel tanks, loading ramps, gantry cranes, etc. Next one is stormwater pollution prevention plan, commonly called a SWIP, from the MPCA addressing surface water management plan with proposed site contouring and structures to dissipate energy and promote infiltration and sediment capture and erosion controls. Next one is site screening, vegetation, and fencing with a plot plan showing location. Next one is Houston County zoning ordinance 30.3, subdivision 2 shall be used to calculate the required number of parking spaces where applicable. Next one is 30.4, subdivision 1 shall be used to develop a parking lot site plan where applicable. And the last one is a traffic management plan of all routes, including vehicle types, transition zones, and a road-based cross-section and methods to control fugitive dust. And that's just what was proposed. I just gave the board tonight.
What's the transition zone?
Transition zone would be that kind of thing that you're speeding up, you're slowing down, you're braking.
Okay.
When you brake, you hit dust. It's mainly in the context of fugitive dust and then transition zones for sight distances. So you have semis need longer distances to get in and out of roads, and you need long enough distances so people can see so you need to account for that kind of thing in how you design your egress from the property, out onto a highway.
Okay, I haven't dragged this out either, but has Brian, the county engineer, looked at this and
Not yet, but we certainly can.
And the township's okay with this.
Yes,
so Brian would,
but but
Oh, is that only so?
the Angus Drive is
That's
is
township.
township.
oh, okay,
We're not going to use Highway 44 XL.
Yeah.
No, there's been a ruling from the DOT that said, you can't transition directly onto Highway 44, which is part of what I'm talking about.
Stipulate how much percentage was for ag use, kind of some kind of proof is what we're coming up with here. So I'd be here, is that right?
yeah, I guess the primarily is the thing that sticks with me. Is there a number that anybody wants?
I keep hearing the 90%. I guess. And then it sounds like it's pretty verifiable by tax exempt records and keeping confidential, but that would be a condition, I guess, to try and.
In number 2, where it says the county may enter onto the premises at reasonable times in a reasonable manner, is there some way that we can work, verify that 90%, like once a year they come check, or?
We can put in an unannounced and make a list of what we would, part of what that we would check. That would probably be a little less, in other words, we're not on a witch hunt. We're just out there.
Oh, right, but I mean,
To verify these are ag-related activities, this kind of thing, and establish list. That could possibly be a condition.
Everybody comfortable with the 90%?
When you say 90%, right, is that 90% sales dollars? Is that 90% customers, right? I think you start putting limitations on that. Like if anybody here has ever owned a business, right, opportunities come up, things happen. Is it 90%? They go down to 89. What are you gonna have them tear down the building, right?
No.
You really want to get where these guys, their job is going out there and inspecting.
At the
And
dis-
then-
It cause a lot of issues for a lot
Or a
of
rolling
things.
average, or,
Sure.
there's a number of ways that those are done.
Well, yeah, what are you gonna do if it's, like you said, 89?
Into their business.
Yeah, you start putting things you can't actually enforce into the
Yeah,
law. So
yeah,
we really
really.
got too many of those.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think we do need to get something to kind of identify that, because they already offered to do something like that. Because I think they feel pretty comfortable with what they're doing, so.
They can do a report to the zoning office once a year.
That should be in the conditions, and it has to be in writing. and we'll-
Okay, we can put that in the conditions.
So we need something to that effect there.
Well, do we make that a condition that they have to provide it, or we're gonna look at it?
No, they should just provide it. I mean, septic business, once a year, any installer had to provide the state with their
that right?
installations once a year.
Okay, well,
And then you would want their raw data and their analysis, or just their raw data. In other words, a statement that says we're complying with, or these are the numbers, and then we evaluate the number. I'm not trying to direct you here, I'm just saying that.
well, I think we need the numbers, but not the name.
Okay.
And I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no, I was just right.
Well, yeah, and I think then we're reported back to the zoning commission. And we're not gonna put I don't know. Any penalty except to report it to the planning commission and.
Well, then we better make it like an 80-20, because like Josh said, 10%. I mean, doesn't give a person a lot of room.
Well, they could go 9 months with everything 100% ag, and then they could go 3 months and it would screw everything up. And that, I think, is really sticking our nose in pretty deep.
I do too.
So you sell one piece of expensive equipment to non-ag and it pushes you over.
Yeah, what are we counting, dollars or?
I'd say more customer base instead of dollars. Just-
Yeah,
Okay.
I just started some here. It says permittee shall supply customer data annually to ensure
compliance.
A rolling
compliance with
average,
it,
a rolling average.
Let's do that.
to
For-
ensure majority of customers are agricultural.
Okay.
And I'm not sure
For
what,
what period? Year?
and then in parentheses, put like, I don't know, 90%, I guess, just to put something in there.
I would say an rolling average, as Marty said, a rolling
But it
average.
sounds like you think you could kind of hit that anyway, right?
Yeah.
Is that correct?
85, 15. Yeah. But 85, 15, huh?
Well, I mean, the majority had sounds primarily majority. I mean, what's the difference in that?
I think majority might work because all the things that are inspected in this county are complaint driven. If
Yeah.
people see stuff going in there, somebody
Yeah.
can come and talk to these guys, and that's how this works. So if we put majority, would everybody be satisfied with that?
I am.
Majority of their business?
Right.
That's what, 51%?
Oh,
Would be 60.
But majority is 51,
oh, I'm not thinking that way, I guess.
isn't it? What is it?
Let's go 70-30, then we should have a cushion each way.
80, 20. I mean,
Getting
You're pretty picky.
Yeah,
yep, I agree.
we got to put something in there, though, I think.
Well, let's go 80-20, that's what they were kind of in favor of.
All right, everybody,
We'll just say, ensure that 80% of the businesses is agricultural,
there you go.
Based on customer
data.
How do you count that?
Exactly. I do data for a living, right? Like you can make numbers look however you want them to look for whoever.
Well, I'm thinking, I've got $1,000 repair, and the next day I buy a quart of oil.
Yeah.
Is that two activities?
Or you could just have somebody who's a farmer come in and buy 15 things for $1.
Yeah,
Not that really.
yeah. Transactions, let's say.
All right.
Records?
Transaction records.
Sure.
Customer information. And the customers are the ones who are going to tell them it's ag or not.
I guess the other thing, we could make it at our discretion, but then
Well, nothing's gonna happen if they fail it. They're just gonna come to the, and like you said, primarily it's somebody sees all kinds of activity and then they look into it and then we got something to look at.
that's a huge driver.
Yeah.
So we're gonna put all these conditions in there then?
Can,
Okay, is that right? Good.
Yeah.
Decide on for the, was it transactions or was it customer?
Transactions.
Customer transactions.
Customer transactions like.
No, not
Okay,
dollar,
I came in
just,
For this job, this is
You
my.
buy a quart of oil, that's a transaction.
just customers,
Yep.
that came in.
Doesn't go for candy though.
yeah, I don't know as though I've got exactly what your verbiage here is, but
Quick thought, can we just use primarily? Instead of I know a direct percentage helps on some things, but I think the issue is if it's below that percentage,
That's so
what action-
ambiguous,
They're just
though.
gonna come in.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, they're just gonna,
If you say primarily, it's like, are you active, are you engaged in agricultural business or not?
Yeah.
That's really the whole question. right?
Mhm.
That's- If we keep it that
But-
instead of.
but what's
the
the, pro-
basis of your tax statement too.
see, that's ambiguous. So what's primarily for me is different than primarily for you.
Yeah.
And this is put in there. It's not, you're not gonna say, well, we got 80-20 and they're at 79. Nobody's gonna look at that.
Right.
But if they're 50-50, then you look at it and says, hey, right here, it says 80-20.
And I'd go back to the same statement. Somebody's gonna complain if there's
Yeah.
cars going in there. But this is what I came up with here. Committee shall supply customer transaction records annually to ensure that primary activities are agricultural.
There you go. You got primary in there too.
I'm good.
So that's condition number what, 4? Committees, okay,
Amy's taken it back.
okay.
So
Committee shall supply customer transaction records annually to ensure that primary activities are agricultural.
I would add to the environmental services office,
Add what?
Submit to,
to the environmental services office.
Okay,
And do we want to put on their count versus somebody,
just leave it at that. I mean,
but somebody 5 years from now says, hey, you gotta supply this transaction records. All we want really is the count.
what do you mean, specify a little more?
Yes,
I think from the transaction record, we could come up with the count, couldn't we?
but they don't want to give you all that
They
information.
won't give the names, but we
Okay,
have the
all right,
details.
all right, that's fine, good. Good, sorry, move on.
Well, I guess the next thing we would add is reading the fine, going through the fine.
We did vote to do that next, so we're ready to read the fine.
we have to vote on the findings, or we can do that after, not the findings, the conditions, we do that at the end.
That's another question. Could we approve the conditions now? We never do it now.
We know what they are,
I would say wait till the end.
Just, it'll be kind of a motion with these conditions.
Right.
yes, understanding these are
Like
the,
we normally do.
I mean, normally, what we do is we go through the findings,
yep,
Yeah,
so.
we gotta do that.
Yes.
I mean, that's,
I'm dead positive.
yeah,
I'd make a motion that in the findings, we, what, do 13?
Yes.
I'll second that.
I think we can do a roll call, I mean, just a voice vote on that one. All those in favor of taking out number 13, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? 13's out.
Okay, condition number 1, that the proposed use conforms to the county land use plan. Staff analysis, when the requirements are met, the conditional use permit provides a mechanism for establishing an agricultural oriented business in an agricultural protection district that conforms to Houston County's land use plan.
And I think tonight, instead of just doing a kind of a approval, we should probably all just kind of state our intentions, what we think about this.
At each one.
At least
Yeah.
on a couple of these, we can decide on that later. But I think we better have some record.
Roll call. All right,
Roll call.
roll call.
And then we can give some reasons why we think that.
Greg Myrie,
Yes.
Rich Schill,
Yes, and I think that our county land use plan is trying to enable agriculture to survive and flourish. And I think these guys are kind of a collateral complementary part of that.
Wayne Feldmeyer,
Yes.
Ed Hamel,
Yes, and I would kind of piggyback on what Rich said there too, and I keep coming back to this, but not limited to thing in here too also. And it's something that we need to look at is what is actually agricultural related, and if we think this is that, then I agree with it.
Jim Weezer,
Yes,
Larry Hafner,
yes,
Josh Grant.
Yes.
Number 2, that the applicant demonstrates a need for the proposed use. Staff analysis, the applicant proposes to repair agricultural equipment, including repaired machinery, semi-trucks, and trailers used for agricultural purposes, which is a legitimate need. Greg Myrie,
Yes.
Rich Sild,
Yes, and having visited their shop, I can, everything that I saw there was ag related, and it was obvious that they needed more room.
Wayne Feldmeyer,
Yeah.
Ed Hamel,
Yes,
Jim Weezer,
yes, I agree. It's a legitimate need.
Larry Hafner,
yes,
Josh Grant.
Yes.
That the proposed use will not degrade the water quality of the county. Staff analysis with adequate surface water control and properly constructed and operated SSTS, subsurface septic treatment system. For managing septic, the water quality will not be compromised. Greg Myrie,
Yes.
Rich Shield,
Yes, and SSTS is a state mandated.
Wayne Feldmeyer,
Yes.
Ed Hamel,
Yes, and I think the conditions kind of approach this too, if we can encourage to put in rainwater gardens and stuff like that, something like that might be an excellent use here.
Jim Weezer,
Yes.
Larry Hafner,
Yes.
Josh Grant.
Yes.
Number 4, that the proposed use will not adversely increase the quantity of water runoff. Staff analysis, the proposed high percentage of impermeable surfaces and structures will require adequate surface water management, including construction, operation, possible treatment, energy dissipation, and infiltration to reduce surface water runoff. Greg Myrie,
Yes.
Rich Shield,
Yes, and they'll have to have again, the name is,
the SWIFT from the MPCA, right? Yes. Wayne Feldmeyer,
Yes.
Ed Hamel,
Yes.
Jim Weezer,
Yes.
Yes.
Josh Grant.
Yes.
Number 5, that soil conditions are adequate to accommodate the proposed use. Staff analysis. The soil bearing capacity is adequate for the proposed structure. The soils can be compacted and graded for the proposed roadways. Additional surface water management features can be incorporated to enhance the site's infiltration capability. Greg Myrie,
Yes.
Rich Shield,
yes, I agree with the analysis.
Wayne Feldmeyer,
Yes.
Ed Hamel,
Yes, I agree.
Jim Weezer,
Yes.
Larry Hafner,
Yes, I agree with staff analysis.
Josh Grant.
Yes.
Number 6, that potential pollution hazards have been addressed and that standards have been met. Staff analysis, while an erosion control plan in Houston County zoning ordinance section 24 is required, the primary pollution from sediment loading will be addressed in the MPCA permitting requirements because greater than 1 acre is being disturbed. The facility is proposing that all activities will be performed indoors, including management of solvents, degreasers, fuels, and lubricants. Additionally, new construction materials and methods have substantially improved energy efficiencies and waste minimizations. Greg Myrie,
Yes.
Rich Shield,
Yes, I agree with the analysis, and I think the conditions also take care of this.
Wayne Feldmeyer,
Yes.
Ed Hamel,
Yes.
Jim Weezer,
Yes, and I'll highlight the fact that MPCA permit is required.
Larry Hafner,
Yes.
Josh Graham.
Yes.
Number 7, that adequate utilities, access, roads, drainage, and other necessary facilities have been or are being provided. Staff analysis. The proximity to existing structures and the city of Caledonia likely lends itself to accessing gas, electrical, and other utilities. Adequate frontage exists with gentle slopes allowing access to Angus Drive. Greg Myrie,
Yes.
Rich Shield,
Yes,
Wayne Feldmeyer.
Yeah.
Ed Hamel,
Yes.
Jim Weezer,
Yes.
Larry Hafner,
Yes.
Josh Graham.
Yes.
Number 8, that adequate measures have been or will be taken to provide sufficient off-street parking and loading space to serve the proposed use. Staff analysis. There is adequate space for off-street parking. Greg Myrie,
Yes.
Rich Shield,
yes, the site is pretty large.
Wayne Feldmeyer,
Yes.
Ed Hamel,
Yes.
Jim Weezer,
Yes.
Larry Hafner,
Yes.
Josh Graham.
Yes.
Number 9, that facilities are provided to eliminate any traffic congestion or traffic hazards which may result from the proposed use. Staff analysis. Substantially larger site distances, transition zones, upgraded subbase, and other features are needed for truck traffic. Traffic from the proposed facility will have to be egress from Angus Drive. 304/2022 email from MnDOT to Amelia Myers noted that access from Highway 44 likely will not be granted. Based on the proposed number of vehicles transitioning from the facility, the site has enough area to prevent hazards. Greg Meyer,
Yes.
Rich Shield,
Yes, and kind of highlight that MinDOT was contacted.
Wayne Feldmeyer,
Yes.
Ed Hamel,
Yes, I agree with the analysis.
Jim Weezer,
yes,
Larry Haffner,
Yes,
Josh Graham.
Yes.
Number 10, that the conditional use will not be injurious to the use and enjoyment of other property in the immediate vicinity for the purposes already permitted. Staff analysis. While the proposed hours of operation and activities are typical of a commercial site, this area is an agricultural protection district and commercial activities are similar in nature. Screening, vegetation, exterior lighting, and other activities can be implemented to substantially reduce the view shed of the building to the local residences. Greg Myrie,
Yes.
Rich Shield,
Yes, and I think some of the conditions have taken care of this also. While I know that people might be upset with it initially, I think that in a few weeks, like everything, get used to the outlines of the building.
Wayne Feldmeyer.
You know, I drove that location from all 4 different directions. And that building is gonna be huge. And it is gonna be an eyesore, especially for the 2 closest neighbors. That's why I kept thinking, you know, if you could keep it in Caledonia, it would make a lot more sense. You know, but if they do the vegetation and that would help. But it probably should be some higher trees and stuff, because Mr. Welch's view is gonna be terrible, and so is Mr. Klug's. You know. I'll say yes to though.
Ed Hamel,
Yes, and they did talk about maybe making it a little smaller, if they could consider that, that might be a help.
Jim Weezer,
yes,
Larry Haffner,
yes,
Josh Graham.
Yes.
Number 11, that the establishment of the conditional use will not impede the normal and orderly development and improvement of surrounding vacant property for predominant uses in the area. Staff analysis. The proposed use for the parcel meets the intent of Houston County's land use plan. Greg Meyer,
Yes.
Rich Shield,
Yes, and I have to really want to highlight that it does meet the county land use plan, and that's mostly what we're interested in here.
Wayne Feldmeyer,
Yes.
Ed Hamel,
Yes,
Jim Weezer,
yes,
Larry Haffner,
yes,
Josh Graham.
Yes.
Number 12, that adequate measures have been or will be taken to prevent or control offensive odor, fumes, dust, noise, and vibration, so that none of these will constitute a nuisance, and to control lighted signs and other lights in such a manner that no disturbance to neighboring properties will result. Staff analysis. The applicant proposes to perform all work indoors, and the roadways will be maintained to prevent fugitive dust. The lighting will be directed down and the signage will be minimal. As noted in the staff analysis for finding number 10, screening and vegetation blocking the view shed towards the residents will substantially reduce the disturbance to neighbors. Greg Meyer,
Yes.
Rich Shield,
Yes, I agree with the analysis.
Wayne Feldmeyer,
Yes.
Ed Hamel,
yes,
Jim Weezer,
yes,
Larry Haffner,
yes,
Josh Graham.
Yes.
Number 13 is skipped. Number 14, that the intensity of any proposed commercial or industrial development is not greater than the intensity of the surrounding uses, or not greater than the intensity characteristic of the applicable zoning district. Staff analysis. The intensity of the proposed commercial activity in an agricultural protection district isn't substantially different when consideration is given to the larger buildings being constructed for agricultural purposes. The proposed traffic and daily activities are not substantially more than seasonal farm activities. Greg Myrie,
Yes.
Rich Shield,
Yes, I agree with this analysis, and especially the part, a lot of dairy farms nowadays are getting bigger and bigger and bigger buildings. I don't think this is any different.
Wayne Feldmeyer,
Yes.
Ed Hamel,
yes, I agree.
Jim Weezer,
yes,
Larry Haffner,
yes,
Josh Graham.
Yes.
Number 15, that site-specific conditions and other such conditions are established as required for the protection of the public's health, safety, morals, and general welfare. Staff analysis. With STS, the site erosion plan, the applicable MPCA requirements, conditions for screening, and other possible conditions listed below, the proposal will be protective of human health and the environment. Greg Myrie,
Yes.
Rich Shield.
Yes, and I think our recommendations have done as much as we possibly can.
Wayne Feldmeyer,
Yes.
Ed Hamel,
Yes.
Jim Weezer,
Yes,
Larry Haffner,
Yes.
Josh Graham.
Yes.
I'll make a motion to accept the findings.
A second.
Second. Let's do a roll call on that. also. Rich.
Greg Myrie,
Yes.
Rich Shield,
Yes.
Wayne Feldmeyer,
Yes.
Ed Hamel,
Yes.
Jim Weezer,
Yes,
Larry Haffner,
Yes.
Josh Graham.
Yes.
Guess we've always used the recommendations for conditions. Is there a motion to accept these conditions as presented?
Wait a minute once. What are the recommendations? Yeah, do we have something in there that they can't have outside storage?
That's in
Yeah,
the
that's
one of
on.
the first one, you can't even have one. car.
Okay, all right, sorry. Brain cramp. There it is. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Would someone like to make a motion to approve these as presented?
I'll make a motion to approve the conditions as presented.
Second,
Second.
I would say because they weren't included in the prior staff report that as you discussed.
Oh,
The conditions weren't in this, so we got to put them
Correct,
in.
right.
the ones from 3/24.
Today's. Not in the staff report there as discussed.
Yeah,
Presented
but
at the meeting.
yeah, but they're dated.
as
Three-
presented on 3/24, how's that sound?
Yeah, and
Yes.
then we added number 4, so.
With number 4.
That's part of the presentation.
Yeah.
Yep,
And you're including all this, the number 4 and everything.
yes.
And you seconded, it, right? Rich?
Yes, I did.
And we'll roll call that too.
Okay. Greg Myrie,
Yes.
Rich Shield,
Yes.
Wayne Feldmeyer,
Yes.
Ed Hamel,
Yes.
Jim Weezer,
yes,
Larry Haffner,
Yes.
Josh Graham.
Yes.
That's approved then as presented, so this goes to the county board, which has the final say on the whole thing.
You have to have a motion for that.
Um,
I'll make a-
we'll approve this.
I guess then you have any further discussion on it.
Yeah, I'll make a motion that we,
that motion was just for the findings or I mean,
Yeah.
the conditions, or was that for the,
No, we already
Recommended.
approved the findings of fact and we approved the
conditions,
conditions.
now we need a
now
motion
we need a
to,
motion to recommend?
Okay, there we go.
Recommend.
Yeah.
I'll make a
Recommend county
motion,
board.
make a motion, we recommend to the supervisors to grant this permit request.
Second,
Second,
motion's been made and seconded, and we'll roll call that too.
Greg Myrie,
Yes.
Rich Shield,
Yes.
Wayne Feldmeyer,
Yes.
yes,
Larry Haffner,
Yes,
Josh Graham.
Yes.
This goes to county board when?
Next,
The motion to approve the last minutes meetings.
Everybody get a
have
chance
minutes?
to read them from last meeting?
I'll second it.
Second, all those, we can just voice this, all those in
Yeah.
favor of approving last month's minutes, so say aye.
aye,
Any opposed? They're approved. Any further discussion of any kind?
I'll make a motion, we adjourn.
Second of that,
second,
all those in favor?
aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.